will read now for the benefit of all sentient beings um, and to spur myself onto vigorous practice since there has been a lot of inertia. Um, I will share an extract from The Great Medicine That Conquers Clinging to the Notion of Reality by Shechen Rabjan. Preliminaries in Refuge. The four reflections that turn the mind away from samsara and toward the Dharma are called preliminaries. This term might create the false impression that they are not of primary importance, but this is not the case. In fact, the preliminaries are the foundation on which all practice is built. Although they are called preliminaries, we should think of them as the main practice. If we engage in these four preliminaries, reflecting upon the value of human existence, death and impermanence, the shortcomings of samsara, the law of causality, there is no doubt that we will develop a genuine wish to escape samsara and eagerly pursue the path. This wish, called renunciation, is what impels us to stay on the path, take refuge, and so on. Many of us have often heard about these four mind changes. We might say, let's just get right to the pith instructions and not waste time. But the life stories of great practitioners in Tibet show how much they valued and immersed themselves in these preliminaries. Masters of the past reflected on the truth of impermanence and the preciousness of human existence for months, if not years. They did not think, it's great to have this human existence, it's quite valuable, let's move on to other practices. Rather, they developed a direct and stable recognition of the true value of human existence and a constant awareness of impermanence. As a result of this appreciation, their urge to practice became second nature. Jamyang Chense Wambo wrote that he achieved the most profound spiritual realization by genuinely experiencing the four changes of attitude. Once Patrul Rinpoche went to meet a great meditator in the retreat. Patrul Rinpoche was a very realized and learned person, yet he asked this hermit for teachings on these four reflections that many people consider to be very basic. The hermit was not surprised. On the first day, he uttered a sentence about the rarity and preciousness of the human existence. Allah, freedom and favorable conditions are so difficult to obtain. Then he just sat quietly. The two great masters began to weep, overwhelmed by the truth of this statement, and they sat silently for the rest of the session. The next day the hermit said, life rushes by like a mountain cascade. Having contemplated this line, they began to shed tears, and so it continued with only one sentence being spoken on each of 4 days. Later, Patrul Rinpoche said that these were the most profound teachings he ever received because they were so experiential. They transformed him from within. A teacher might ask you to practice each of the reflections for a month so that the teachings really become a part of you. Precious human birth. Now that you have at last obtained this free, privileged human birth, which is so hard to find and so meaningful, it is worthwhile to transform your being in solitude without being attached to this life, which is of such small importance. According to the Buddhist teachings, there are many other realms or states of being. None of them, however, are as conducive to engaging on the path of Dharma as is human birth. For example, celestial beings are gods with incredibly long lives. In their celestial realms, everything seems to be easy, and all their needs, including every comfort and pleasure, are fulfilled. However, all this comfort and happiness easily distract them. Beings in this state of existence lack the incentive to become interested in the Dharma practice. Finally, at the time of death, they foresee how they are powerlessly going to lose their God life and fall back into the suffering of the lower realms, and they experience the most horrendous suffering. Human existence is unique in having just enough suffering to make us want to be free of suffering, yet not so much that we cannot practice. To maximize this precious opportunity, it is worthwhile to transform your being in solitude. It seems pointless to have a human existence and not take full advantage of it. People tend to waste this potential through indifference or even worse by engaging in destructive and negative actions. Our lives will be a mere imitation of how truly meaningful the human experience can be if we do not cherish this precious opportunity. A Tibetan teacher once said that compared to all other possible existences, to be born as a human being is as rare as the specks of dust on one fingernail compared to all the dust on earth. Missing the point, a student from China said, if the Tibetans came to China, they would see that human existence is not rare at all. China is full of people. It may be that the earth is becoming overpopulated, but there are still far fewer humans than there are members of other species, and among the human beings who do exist, very few live a truly meaningful life. Ask yourself how many people realize the preciousness of this life. Of those, how many think of using it to practice the Dharma? How many of them actually start to practice? Of those who start, how many continue? Since it is so hard to find, yet so meaningful to have, why does Sheche and Jalsa write that this life is of such small importance? The reason is twofold. First, our ordinary preoccupations and mundane pursuits are not really very important and distract us from the path which can bring immense benefits for many lifetimes to come. Second, this life is just one brief episode among many past and future lives. We need a much wider perspective than the one that is entangled in petty concerns or the temporary successes of the moment. Once we begin to concentrate on our spiritual practice, we soon discover that it is the best use of our time. Peace and solitude are conducive to concentration and give rise to fewer distractions. Such conditions help the beginners develop, stabilize, and deepen their meditation practice. When we hear about renouncing samsara, we might feel scared and think, oh, but it's so familiar and engaging, why should I abandon it? We fear that this means we must give up wonderful things, and it is absurd to give up something pleasant. However, in this case, we are not giving up anything that is authentically good, but rather freeing ourselves from trouble. A true analogy for renunciation is the act of freeing a bird from a golden cage. It would be odd if the bird thought that the cage was nicer than the sky and did not seek its freedom. Sometimes samsara and its pleasures seem very appealing. It's a little bit like traveling in India when after a long bus journey on busy roads, you come to a small roadside restaurant. Chapatis, curries are displayed beautifully, ready to be eaten. You can smell the delicious spices. Just to see the dishes makes you salivate, and you want to sit down and eat right away. But then you go around to the back and have a look in the kitchen. One cook with a big belly is sweating profusely over the food, while another cook is kneading dough with his feet. The uncooked food looks spoiled, and there are flies and smoke everywhere. When you go back and look at your plate, you feel disgusted and not as eager to eat as before. Likewise, samsara appears to be attractive at first. But if you look at it in the same way you did the food in the kitchen, you notice that the afflictive emotions are busy preparing all the samsaric pleasures you crave, the chocolate cake of desire, the chilies of anger, the sweet and sour sauce of jealousy. You immediately lose your appetite for what at first glance looked so mouth-watering. Once you realize the truth, you will find it much easier to leave your craving behind, and renunciation becomes easy and natural. Even if we recognize the true value of human existence, we can still fall prey to inertia and laziness. Laziness is the main obstacle to making the most of this life and putting the Dharma into practice. We always postpone practice, saying, oh, I'll do that later when I have some free time or when I retire. But with this attitude, the time will never come. The sutras repeatedly emphasize meditation on thoughts of impermanence of death as a way to dispel laziness. These thoughts spur us on to practice. That is why Chechen Jalsa approach. Amid the clouds of impermanence and illusion, lightning of life dances. Are you sure you won't die tomorrow? Death is unavoidable, so practice the Dharma. Um, okay, that was from The Great Medicine That Conquers Clinging to the Notion of Reality, and it's by Chechen Rabjam, and it was about a precious human life. And now we're gonna read a chapter on impermanence. When we go on vacation, we make elaborate preparations. We book flights, make hotel reservations, plan what to take, and so on. If we are going hiking or skiing, we begin to exercise to get in shape. We put a lot of time and energy into just one vacation, yet we are apathetic about preparing for our own death. Why are we so casual about the most momentous trip that awaits us? Death. We are going to leave this body, but we are not interested in preparing ourselves for the inevitable journey on which only our karma will accompany us like a shadow. Our differing attitudes toward those two types of trips seem disproportionate when we compare their relative importance. We are not always aware of impermanence, although we are surrounded by it on many different levels. Gross and subtle levels of impermanence exist everywhere in the external universe. Today, near Bodh Gaya, shabby huts made of tin and plastic sheets cover a small hill that in the time of the Buddha hosted a vast monastic congregation with great number of communities studying and practicing. Barely a stone of that monastery is left. Memories are all that remain. People are also impermanent. In fact, everyone is subject to impermanence. It does not discriminate between enlightened beings and ordinary beings. We all age, get sick, and die. No one can escape this cycle. The conditions of our own lives are constantly changing. We might be rich one day and bankrupt the next, or vice versa. However much we wish the opposite, there is nothing lasting or permanent that we can rely on. Yet we grasp at things hoping to find happiness. Normally, we do not even bother to try to hold on to something that we know can last for only a fraction of a second. This is why reflecting on the transitory nature of human existence lessens our attraction and rejection of things of this world. The more we meditate on impermanence, the more our grasping and hence our impulses of attachment and repulsion diminish. All the great practitioners of the past took impermanence as one of their main subjects of reflection. The great meditator Kara Gomchen stayed in a cave with a thorny bush at the entrance. Each time he exited the cave, his robes would get caught on the thorns and he would say, I should cut that thorn bush down. But then moments later he would change his mind and think, oh, what's the use? Who knows if I will ever go back inside again or if I will still be alive even in a few minutes from now. Later, when entering the cave again, the same thing would happen and he would think, I should cut that bush, but who knows if I'll ever come out again. Better to make use of every minute and meditate rather than waste time. Karagomchen had taken impermanence to heart, and after many years of retreat, that bush was still there as a reminder. Thank you very much. We finish. Hmm.